Hey, all you cool cats and kittens, it's your favorite history teacher back at you again with another historical video. Today, we are talking about the Holocaust. And just to forewarn you, there are some brutal pictures. But as with history, some of these things, we it was well documented and we must learn from the past. So, what I mean, it's not a better way, but yeah, it's a somber type of lecture. I'm not trying to be too hyped about it because the Holocaust. So, a lot of death. So, yeah, a new order and the Holocaust. Again, many of us are very much aware of how bad it was. So, this should be a refresher for everyone. All right, let's get into it. That was your warm up. Okay, our objectives: understand the causes and effects of the Holocaust and draw conclusions about how Native peoples were forced to work for Nazis and the Japanese. All right, New World Order, NWO. In 1942, Nazi regime stretched across continental Europe from the English Channel in the west to the outskirts of Moscow in the east. Nazi occupied Europe was largely organized in one of two ways. Nazi Germany directly annexed some areas, such as Western Poland, and made them into German provinces. Most of occupied Europe was run by German military or civilian officials with help from the local people who collaborated with the Nazis. Nazi administration in the conquered lands to the east were especially ruthless. Seen as the living space, or remember that word, Lebensraum, for German expansion, these lands were populated, Nazis thought, by racially inferior Slavic peoples. Hitler's plans for an Aryan racial empire were so important to him that the Nazis began to put their racial program into effect as soon as the conquest of Poland was over. Hitler recalled the genocide of the Armenians from World War One in his plan, saying, "Who, after all, speaks today of the annihilation of the Armenians?" Well, that's a bold statement to make, a little arrogant. Heinrich Himmler, leader of the Schutzstaffel, was in charge of the German resettlement plans in the east. Himmler's task was to move the Slavic peoples out and replace them with Germans. Slavic peoples include Czech, Polish, Serbo-Croatian, Slovene, and the Ukrainian people. 1 million Poles were uprooted and moved into southern Poland, and hundreds of thousands of ethnic Germans were brought in to colonize these German provinces. So kick them out and resettle it with German-speaking people, Aryan people, blonde hair, blue eyes. So not this new world order of Hulk Hogan and wrestling, but this one. So yeah, again, Lebensraum, Germany would take over these other places for their resources and resettle them. This is Heinrich Himmler, master plan. So these are people considered Slavs. You have your Eastern Slavs, which is like Russia. And then you have your Western Slavs, which is like Poland, Belarus. And then you have your Southern Slavs, which is like, what is this? Croatia, Bosnia Herzegovina, Macedonia. Maybe not Macedonia, but you know what I'm talking about. Albania. Okay. And then again, here are more pictures: Slovakia, Ukraine, I don't really know why, like, Austria, Hungary, like, Romania isn't one. It's kind of head scratching, but you have Bulgaria, Serbia. Um, I don't know what ME is. Oh, that's Montenegro. I think that's Macedonia, Bosnia, Slovenia. So, though these areas in colors were populations of Slavic people. And this is a way, kind of very racist, of how they were able to tell if you were a Slav or Aryan. They would measure the width of your nose. All right, Germanized backfire. So, the invasion of the Soviet Union made the Nazis even more excited about German colonization. Remember, Germany was late to the colonizing party when during the times of imperialism. So it was like, hey, we get our chance now, type of deal. Hitler planned a colossal project of social engineering after the war. Poles, Ukrainians, and Russians would be removed and become slave labor, and the German peasants would resettle the land on the abandoned lands and Germanize them. You know, grow only German foods, German products, Germanize. By the summer of 1944, more than 7 million European workers labored in Germany, making 20% of the German workforce. Now, that's kind of, what do you call it? A problem, because now you have 7 million more workers coming to Germany. And whether or not they were paid, probably not paid, um, that's going to upset the balance of workforce in Germany. 7 million workers were forced to do labor in the Nazis in their own countries, farms, industries, and military camps. The use of forced labor caused many problems for Germany. Sending so many workers to Germany disrupted industrial production in the occupied countries. So it's like they took over those places and then they sent the people who were able to work to Germany and not keep them in where they took over. So they couldn't, like, keep up the pace of production. So then, too, was the brutal way in which the Germany recruited foreign workers led to more and more people to resist Nazi occupational forces. Not necessarily lead an uprising, but yes, lead an uprising. In time, it will happen. So, yeah, this guy's looking a little too happy. I just searched German uh, foreign workers. Probably wasn't a good search, but All right. So no aspect of the Nazi New Order was more terrifying than the deliberate attempt to exterminate all the Jews. The racial struggle was a key element of Hitler's world of ideas in his, book, Mein Kampf. He saw a clearly defined conflict of opposites. On one side were the Aryans, who were the creators of human cultural development, according to Hitler. And on the other side were the Jews, whom Hitler blamed for Germany's defeat in World War I and the Great Depression. Himmler and the SS closely shared Himmler and the SS closely shared Hitler's racial ideas. The SS was given responsibility for what the Nazis called their final solution to the Jewish problem. And the final solution was the genocide of the Jewish people. Whereas Judaism is a religion and being Jewish is another part of it, Hitler assumed Judaism and Jewish people as one, as a race. So, Aryan, non-Aryan. And these were published all across the country. All right, ghetto resistance. So, Reinhard Heydrich, head of the SS's security service, SS's SS, he had the task of administering the final solution. Heydrich created a special strike force called the Einsatzgruppen to carry out Nazi plans. After the defeat of Poland, these forces rounded up all Polish Jews and put them in ghettos and set up in many Polish cities. Conditions in these ghettos were horrible as families were crowded together in unsanitary housing. Nazis tried to starve out the residents by allowing only minimal amounts of food, but in spite of their struggling and suffering, the residents carried on. Some residents organized resistance against the Nazis, such as the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. As Nazis shipped Jews from Warsaw Ghetto to the death camp at Treblinka, the residents formed a resistance group. When more deportations were ordered in January 43, Jews fought back. Germans will suspend deportation until April 19th, which was actually the first day of Passover. So it lasted for about like 3 months. But Passover is one of the holiest times in the Jewish religion. So not like the Germans weren't thinking about that at all. Against overwhelming odds, the Jewish resistance in the ghetto fought German deportation to the death camps until May 16th, when Germans finally took over the ghetto and dynamited the Great Synagogue of Warsaw. By June 1941, the Einsatzgruppen were also given a new job as acting as mobile killing units. These SS death squads followed the regular army's advance into the Soviet Union, for example, and their job was to round up the Jews in their villages, execute them, and bury them in mass graves. Now, people love mass graves. Granted, you could dig a hole in the ground and fill as much as you can, but it's also like inhumane because, like, in our Western society, we have cemeteries, and we honor the dead. And if you have a mass grave, you don't know who's buried there, and it's kind of not right. That's Mr. Heydrich Reinhard. Here are pictures from the Warsaw Ghetto. And these are, again, pictures of the Einsatzgruppen going into the Soviet Union and about to kill a woman holding her child. And then you have this picture. And then these pictures. Yeah, they're kind of messed up. Just to name a few. All right. The Einsatzgruppen probably killed more than 1 million Jews, but as appalling as that sounds, this was too slow by Nazi standards, so they decided to kill European Jews and specially built death camps. Beginning in 1942, Jews from countries in occupied Germany or sympathetic to Germany were rounded up, packed like cattle into freight trains, and shipped to Poland. 6 extermination centers were built in Poland for this purpose, the largest being Auschwitz. About 30% of the new arrivals at Auschwitz were sent to labor camp, where many were starved or worked to death. The remainder of the people went to the gas chambers, while some inmates were subjected to cruel and painful medical experiments. And it is appalling, and it is because we know this, due to the fact that the Germans were excellent bookkeepers. As I'm not trying to make that sound funny, they kept documentation of everything. I'll leave it at that. By the spring of 1942, the death camps were in full operation. First priority was given to the elimination of the Polish ghettos, as they were causing problems. By summer, Jews were also being shipped from France, Belgium, and Holland. Even as the Allies were winning the war in 1944, that rhyme, Jews were still being shipped from Greece and Hungary to Germany. And despite their desperate military needs, even late in the war when Germany faced certain defeat, again, rhyming, the final solution often had a priority in using these railroad cars to ship Jews to death camps rather than using them to send to, to the front where they needed supplies. So that priority piece made me think of this scene from Harry Potter. She needs to sort out her priorities. And there is Heinrich Himmler. And then the yellows are cities with ghettos. And then the death symbol are the death camps. So you have Kelmno, Treblinka, Sohibor, Majdanek, Belzec, Trostenetz. I've never heard of that one. And then Auschwitz right there. So they would be sent all the way from Rome, from Paris, Vienna, Berlin. Crazy, guys, crazy. There's Treblinka. There's Auschwitz. And there are survivors. Which one is it? This picture right here is very famous, as well as this man right here is Elie Wiesel. And this is how they would be treated. This is where they would sleep. This is where they would eat, go to the bathroom. Ridiculous, right? All right, final. The Germans killed approximately 6 million Jews. More than 3 million of them were in the death camps. Even in concentration camps that were not designed for mass murder, large numbers of inmates were worked to death or subjected to deadly medical experiments. Virtually 90% of Jewish populations of Poland, the Baltic countries, and Germany were killed. Overall, the Holocaust was responsible for the death of nearly 2 out of every 3 European Jews. The 66%, if you don't know percentages. The Nazis were also responsible for the deliberate death by shooting, starvation, and overwork as many 9 to 10 million non-Jewish people. So that's about. This must be a new number because growing up, I was always told 6 million Jews, 6 million others. Well, this looks like more numbers have come out, and it's more or less 16 million, 6 million Jews, 15 million, and then 9 to 10 million non-Jewish people. Nazis considered the Roma, who are often called gypsies, to be an alien race. About 40% of Europe's Roma people were killed in death camps. Political activists, homosexuals, and Jehovah's Witnesses were also persecuted and killed by the Nazis. Leading citizens of the Slavic peoples were also arrested and killed. Probably about 4 million Poles, Ukrainians, and Belarusians lost their lives as slave laborers. Finally, at least 3 to 4 million Soviet prisoners of war were also killed. The Nazi mass slaughter of European Jews is also known as Shoah. I don't know if I pronounced that right, which is the Hebrew word meaning total destruction. Many Jews attempted to resist the Nazis. Friends and strangers aided to some Jews, hiding them or smuggling them in safe areas. A few foreign diplomats also saved Jews by issuing exit visas. And for example, Denmark almost saved its entire Jewish population. And there are examples of this all across history. And it is also in movies as well. I can only think of Inglorious Bastards at this point, but people tried to protect them as European citizens knew what was going on. So here are some dead bodies. When the Russians, Soviets, were the first to liberate the camps, and they tried to burn the bodies as fast as they can, but they just weren't burning fast enough. And if you know anything about decomposition of dead bodies, they start to smell. And when you unearth mass graves like this, it's truly appalling. Very much so. Yeah. All right. So they knew. Some people did not believe the accounts of death camps because during World War I, Allied propaganda greatly exaggerated German atrocities to arouse enthusiasm for the war. Most often, people pretended not to notice what was happening. Even worse, collaborators even helped the Nazis hunt down the Jews. Although the Allies were aware of concentration camps and death camps, they chose to concentrate on ending the war first, then figuring out what to do after. And Oh, hindsight 2020. It's always 2020 in hindsight, but probably could have been doing more, even though we knew. You know, I don't know how else to say it without. Anyways, it wasn't until after the war did the full extent of the horror and inhumanity of the Holocaust impress itself upon the people's consciousness, and then they were like, "Oh, well, we should have done something." But again, people Jews were so much ostracized in Europe that people, even if they were sympathetic, were happy that someone. This is going to sound horrible to say. We're getting rid of the Jews. I mean, if you have some leader like Hitler blaming a people, a race, a religion for the loss of World War One, Germans were, whether they're pro Hitler or anti something, I don't know how else to say it. I'm gonna sound stupid. So if you don't know this book, Elie Wiesel and Night is very, very much mainstream, very popular. And if you want to know a little bit more about a survivor, read this book. I'm sure I read it as a freshman, so in high school. So maybe you did too in your English class, but yeah, Night. All right, Asia for Asians. So we're gonna switch over because yes, the Holocaust was bad, and what happened there is something you can't compare to. But the Japanese were pretty much doing the same thing over in East Asia. And as we've discussed ad nauseum, Japan needed its new possessions Asia to meet its growing needs for raw materials such as tin and oil. As markets for manufactured goods to organize these possessions, Japanese leaders included them into the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere. Sounds so much fun. This economic community was supposedly to provide mutual benefits to the occupied areas and to Japan, but the Japanese conquered much of East and Southeast Asia under the slogan Asia for Asiatics. I don't know why it's not Asia for Asians, but tomato, tomato. The Japanese officials in occupied territories promised that local governments would be established under Japanese control. However, real power rested with the Japanese military authorities in each territory. We've talked about this before in a previous lecture. And in turn, the Army General Staff in Tokyo controlled the local Japanese military command. Militarism is, I said it before, militarism is often associated with Japan during World War II, placing, military personnel, beliefs, agendas in the government over society in general. So Japan used the economic resources of its colonies for its war machine and recruit the conquered peoples, often forcibly, to serve in their local military units or in public works projects. In many cases, these policies brought severe hardships to the peoples who were subjected to them. In Vietnam, Indochina, as it was called, more than 1 million people starved in 1944 and 1945 when Japan forcibly took their rice to sell abroad. Wow, that's rude. Here's a propaganda poster for the co-prosperity sphere. And here's a American political cartoon calling it the Eastern Monroe Doctrine. All right, last slide. Japanese world order. As first, many Asian nationalists, people who have pride in their country, took Japanese promises at face value and agreed to cooperate. Eventually, the nature of the Japanese occupation policies became clear and sentiment turned against Japan. Japanese officials also provoked such attitudes by their contempt for local customs. So, like the Germans, Japanese military forces often had little respect for the lives of their subjected peoples. The Japanese occupation of China has become notorious for its acts of looting, destruction of property, and murder committed against Chinese civilians. The rape of Nanking comes to mind. Additionally, to help their war effort, the Japanese used labor forces composed of both prisoners of war and local peoples. This behavior also created a dilemma for many nationalists. They had no desire to see the return of colonial powers, but they did not like how the Japanese were what the Japanese were doing, while others really did nothing. Some nationalists would try to have it both ways. For instance, like Indonesian patriots pretended to support Japan while actually trying to sabotage them at the same time. So, not just giving in wholeheartedly to the destruction caused by the Japanese military. So here you have a picture of Japanese forces. Sorry, I was getting the book. The book. Um, Here are dead people left in Japan's wake. And again, you have Japan here. Um, Here is actually Japan. And remember, they took over Korea first, and then they went into Manchuria. 1932, and then they went over to 1937, Inner Mongolia and northeast China down below, and then purple is the start of the war. But these are in 1932. These were made in 1932 in purple, and then they just attacked, 41. And that is going to conclude the lecture. I thought I hit end. But yeah, so it was again not a cheerful one, because how cheerful can you make it? Don't really, want to make it come off as cheerful, if that makes any sense. But the Holocaust, bad thing. Genocide, bad thing. Mistreatment of people's, bad thing. And yeah, it's it is what it is. Hopefully, it doesn't happen again, and we don't need it to happen again. Uh, so yeah, hopefully you guys did enjoy that. Your homework is page, what was it, 468, page 468, questions 2, 3, and 4. And yeah, that's going to conclude it. I know it was a little bit of a longer lecture, but you know, and somber, not much, inflection and changing in voices, because it's sad to talk about. It is what it is. All right. Hope you guys did enjoy that. If you did, make sure you hit that like button, leave a comment, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.